Good Wednesday evening, everyone. This is Scotty Powell, Carolina's Weather Group. Welcome to another episode tonight. It is the April 15th edition. I hope you have your taxes done, because if not, you got just a couple more hours to get them done. And we appreciate you guys joining us this evening as we're going to talk about the tornado outbreak in the eastern part of North Carolina back in 2011. It's a kind of a continuation of our severe weather month that we've been taking. Has been taking place this month. So we appreciate all our guests coming in tonight, and we'll introduce those folks here in just a little bit. Kind of a couple of housekeeping rules. This will have a question or answer session, so if you want to submit a question, I hope you have your taxes done. If not, a couple more hours to get them done. And we will get it in. Joining us this evening as we're going to talk about the tornado outbreak with questions, and then we will also be doing a podcast. So if you're not able to listen to the entire show, we will rebroadcast this on the podcast, and you can pick it up in your app store. So with that, I'm going to toss it over to Joey, who is in Catawba County. And Joey, I will let you kind of talk about the weather today.
It was wet. We've seen a good bit of rain here. I didn't look at the exact measurement of rain we had here in the county, but we definitely had a good duck weather, washed the pollen out of the air. Not much to really say about it other than that. So it was just wet, and we spent a long day today in the office. Me and Scotty doing lots of work with Burke weather. So. That's about all we saw for the day. So, the inside of an office is not great for weather, but anyway, I guess what we'll do is we'll pass it down to I guess we'll go trying to go all the way down to we'll go all the way down to the future and let Austin come on and talk first, as he's the eldest member other than Ricky on tonight.
Thank you, Austin Taylor. They call me the future. I wish that we'd have got a better thunderstorm yesterday, if you could call it that. A few rumbles of thunder. It made me excited. It's been the first time since last fall that I've heard a thunderstorm. It's really exciting. We hit 62 degrees today at about 2:15, and we've had about 3/10 of an inch of rain. And that's all I got.
It sounds like that's all he's got. So we'll pass it on over to Ricky, who is in Charlotte, who you were out a past couple of weeks, Ricky, so we're glad to have you back.
Thanks. Yeah, I was in D.C., and then what was I doing last week? I don't remember.
It was at the Hornets game, I believe.
Oh, yeah, the Hornets game. That's what I was doing last week, and they lost.
It was it was one to forget. So
new team, same players, and same record so far. But anyway, regardless, the weather's been kind of dreary, too. We picked up officially at UNC Charlotte by our campus weather station almost an inch of rain today, 0.96 inches. Temperature really didn't get that high. We only got a high temperature up, that was last night. So we had the high temperature last night of 78. It wasn't that warm today, but it was really chilly. So hopefully we'll get out of that rainy pattern, and my two colleagues here at UNC Charlotte as well probably hope we get out of that rainy pattern as well. Kit and Cody, you both are matching tonight. It's kind of weird. They both have green shirts on for anyone listening on the podcast. And then I should say that Cody is our newly elected AMS/NWA Storm President. So congrats to him, too. So now you continue to have the UNC Charlotte AMS President on next year on this panel.
Very awesome. Congratulations, Cody. I think he's having some technical difficulties.
Oh, thanks. I was muted.
There you go. All right, and Cody and Kit, we're glad you guys are on. We're going to, since we had a little bit of late start, we're going to go ahead and go into our guests tonight. We have Gary Stephenson from Time Warner Cable Channel in Raleigh. He is the chief meteorologist there. We also have Wes Hohenstein. Sorry. I knew I would mess it up one time. From WNCN, the embassy affiliate in Raleigh, and I think he may be away right now. And we also have Stephen Paff, who is a meteorologist at the National Weather Service in Wilmington. So, guys, we appreciate you coming on. And, Gary, I'll let you start off and kind of talk a little bit about the Triad area and if you want to talk a little bit about your background in weather as well.
Well, I'll talk about the triangle area, not the Triad, okay?
Triangle.
Okay. Wrong angle, man. Okay, wrong
That's right.
Well, I agree with you, man. Today has been just downright gloomy. But of course, we had our little severe thunderstorm last night that got the border counties, and we also had the isolated, I guess, just a shed in the wrong place at the wrong time in northern Wilson County that got a bit of a microburst or straight line winds last night that got knocked off a cinder block foundation. We had a very active weather week last week with severe weather on Wednesday and Thursday, and then the stuff that we expected on Friday just didn't happen. But overall, I'll take a little bit of gloomy because kind of gives you a chance to recharge your batteries before we get into the meat of severe weather season later on this spring.
Very much so.
I have one question. What is a thunderstorm?
What is a thunderstorm?
I can't even remember anymore. every storm, like Scotty got thunder up in Burke County. There was thunder down in the Statesville area, and it totally skipped me. I swear, I don't think I've heard thunder since like October. I kid you not.
Man, you sound like Austin. I mean, Austin's right. Those thunderstorms were pretty good coming out of the Sandhills yesterday, and as soon as they crossed into Harnett County, they just died. And then we had the redevelopment last night. But hang on, we got more storms on the way. I'm sure. Just hang on, everybody.
And I think Scotty went live too. This whole technical issues are just going to, they're exploding like a thunderstorm, I guess, or something like that. So we'll go ahead and let Wes introduce himself. Wes, how's everything going up in your neck of the woods? And I believe you're still muted, buddy. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Gotcha.
All right. Well, as we were talking about before we went live tonight, Gary and I are literally right around the corner from each other here in North Raleigh. So very, very rarely do he and I not get the exact same weather. So I don't have much different to share other than the fact that I am off tomorrow. So this is my Friday. So if I appear to be a little bit extra excited and motivated tonight, that's the reason why. But I am the chief meteorologist at NBC here in Raleigh. I do the 6, 7, and 11 o'clock news. I've been in the area about 10 years, been working here. I grew up in St. Louis. I'm a huge Cardinals fan. I went to St. Louis University, which are the Billikens. Nobody knows what a Billiken is, and sometimes I have to go look it up to remind myself. But I've worked in Lafayette, Louisiana, Salt Lake City, Utah, Houston, Texas, Tucson, Arizona, and now here in Raleigh. And hopefully this is where I stay. This is by far the most exciting / best weather in the whole country I've seen.
I thought we all learned what a Billiken was last year when they made that deep tournament run.
Well, deep is a relative term. If we make it to the round of 32, it's a deep run for us.
Well, you're still doing better than Charlotte, so that you got that at least.
Actually, I have my daughter is a junior down at UNC Charlotte in the nursing program, so I'm very familiar with Charlotte and a big fan of the 49ers down there.
There you go. All right, Steve, you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you do at the Weather Service?
Yeah, sure. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Am I coming across all right?
Gotcha.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm Steve Paff. I'm the warning coordination meteorologist with the National Weather Service in Wilmington. And I've been in Wilmington about 16 years. My first duty station was Corpus Christi, Texas. So I have a lot of coastal background into my career, a lot of tropical weather. And, of course, have seen my bouts of severe weather here in Wilmington and have a whole bunch of good things to show about the April 16th outbreak. So been looking forward to this. My first Google Chat Hangout. I'm getting technical finally.
Awesome. Well, alrighty. Well, then why don't we just go ahead and start on off a little bit about going back in time, kind of setting this outbreak up. You know, we're on April 15th today, and that's kind of really when the outbreak got going, as most of you who are probably watching this know. Our buddies James Spann and folks down in Alabama were covering the outbreak as it went across portions of Alabama, and then it was the first time I've seen a day 2 moderate for North Carolina. Steve, can you say anything to that?
Yeah, we very rarely see those. I mean, typically it's the old C text or now the marginal or the slight risk is what we typically see, and we very rarely get organized convection, as you know. It's fairly clustered type, thriving off of multiple cell type thunderstorms. So I mean, it's at least metric wise, as far as making our goals and verification, probability detection, lead time, it's very difficult compared to parts of the country where you see that the classic severe weather that we all have learned about. But yeah, so we had that moderate risk, and then it was pushed up to a high risk, and we typically see maybe a high risk in southeastern North Carolina maybe once every 7-8 years or so. Moderate risk maybe once every 3 to 5 years.
And so for Gary and Wes, I mean, when you saw that as a forecaster who has to communicate this the day before, because the storms hit on a Saturday, so you were more than likely, both of you, I assume, on air the day before on that Friday talking about the potential for storms. What was your thought process, Gary?
Well, I mean, like Steve says, it's fairly rare to get a moderate risk in North Carolina, and it's amazing more often than not when you either have a moderate risk, either nothing happens or it really ramps up and you have a lot of problems. But it really looked like that was going to lead into a significant severe weather outbreak, and it was leading up to. I mean, I think on Wednesday we actually started talking about the potential for strong to severe thunderstorms going into Saturday. And when you're that far out, you face the fine line of crying wolf, because it's like, if this thing falls apart, you're going to really look terrible. But what we tried to do is every day from about midweek then into Thursday, into Friday, just kind of ramp it up a little bit every day, saying, okay, now it's looking a little bit more likely that it's going to be an active weather day. And we try, it is a fine line, and I know all of you will agree with this, of panicking people and informing people when it comes to severe weather. And that's what we were playing with leading up to this. It's like, it really looks bad, but I don't want you to panic about it. I want you to be prepared. This is what we're going to be dealing with. And we actually started using the word tornado, I think, as early as Thursday, that we could have the possibility of tornadoes. And then we really ramped it up a bit more as we headed into Friday. And then by Saturday, of course, we were firmly in the moderate risk. And as Steve already mentioned, about midday, we went into that high risk. And the only time I ever remember another high risk, and again, being in western North Carolina, those that happened in central and eastern North Carolina, I probably didn't pay as much attention to, but I remember the high risk that we had prior to the March '84 outbreak. And when SPC drops North Carolina into high risk, something bad's probably about to happen. So it was just a slow process, a slow spin up to tell people that it was coming. It was going to be bad. This potentially was going to be a once in 20, 25 year event. And people really needed to be on their A game, because when these storms started firing, it could get bad really fast.
And Wes, I mean, 2011 was kind of just the start of the age of social media in my mind for weather. We weren't gun-ho in it as we are now. We didn't have so many people on Twitter, so many people on Facebook tweeting weather watches and warnings. Didn't have as many Facebook weather pages either. So, from your station standpoint, did you guys do a whole lot of social stuff or web stuff before the event?
Wow, now you're really asking me to remember. What I know is it was such a busy day. Even though we had 2 people here, it was very hard to take time to get information out on social media, because I mean, at one point we had 2 of the strongest tornadoes on the ground at the same time. So we're trying to delineate and figure out those 2 while we're talking through it on air nonstop. So no, social media played a small part back then, but it would definitely play a bigger role today. I'm trying to even remember. So I'm Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram now. I think back then I was barely Facebook and more Twitter, but it's amazing how things have changed in the last 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Ricky, if I can kick in real fast too, actually that was the day when I realized the importance of Facebook and Twitter, because we actually had people sending us messages via their smartphones saying, our power's out, I can't get any other information other than what you guys are sending out on Facebook and Twitter. And we actually had the advantage that day. We actually had 3 meteorologists here. We had one specifically doing social media, one backing me up on air. So that's and I understand exactly where Wes is coming from too, because when all heck is breaking loose, your primary thing is to get things on television. And if you don't have enough people, it really is difficult to push things out to social media. But that day did really convince me how important Facebook and Twitter was, because some people, that was the only way that they were getting severe weather updates at that point once they had lost power.
And Steve, can you talk a little bit about how the system in North Carolina got going? I mean, from my memory, we had a kind of a dying squall line that moved through western North Carolina in the morning, but really re-intensified as it got a little bit east of Charlotte, and then really ramped up as it got towards the Sanford-Raleigh area.
Yeah, if I recall, I believe that upper trough finally got a negative tilt to it, which really enhanced the helicity, especially in the low levels there, and as that line began to progress towards the PD in South Carolina and towards Lumberton and central North Carolina, it started to get that broken line look to it, with a lot of cells with V notches, and you can see the appendages on them pretty early on as they approached the Wilmington forecast area. And my day began out at WMBF in Myrtle Beach. I was doing, they had an open house, and I had a display set up, and we knew it was going to get really bad, but there were some, if I do recall, there were some discrete cells out ahead of the line that we issued our initial tornado warnings on near Conway, South Carolina. So I left Myrtle Beach, immediately went out to the Conway area. I figured I'd go there and then get back to the office before the main line came through. Saw the cell, highly tilted thunderstorm. I think there's too much tilt to it. It certainly was rotating, but it didn't produce any damage. It really held off for our forecast area when that main broken line came through. Just some phenomenal rotation with some of the storms.
And then you had a few stronger tornadoes in your region, though, as well, right? There was an EF3 a little bit near Onslow County. Is that it?
Yeah, our biggest tornadoes impacted Bladen County for the most part. There was one that originated near Bladenboro, moved towards Elizabethtown, impacted them. And then we had another one that bordered our forecast area with Raleigh's forecast area, Tar Heel, Ammon area. There were a couple fatalities with that one as well. So we had one fatality in Bladenboro and 2 in the Ammon area. A lot of destruction to a hog farm in that area as well. So I mean, there was certainly environmental impacts in addition to the impacts that were suffered by the communities in the area.
And I've heard, that some offices, when they get big outbreaks like this, they try to kind of divide the county warning area in certain parts, so the forecaster would have to watch all the storms. What did you guys do that day? Was it, one forecaster per storm? Did you do anything special?
We sectorized. We had one team working with the South Carolina storms and another with the North Carolina storms, and of course it gets dicey when you get that transition across the state line. But working in pairs, having a couple extra set of eyes on the radar displays and AWIPs working. So you had one helping to identify the significant features, and yet another one who was basically writing the warnings and statements. So we had 2 pairs working that event, in addition to an event coordinator that's overseeing kind of everything else that's going on, in addition to our routine duties.
And then one last question from a Weather Service perspective. In a lot of tornado outbreaks, we seem to see more tornado warnings in this case than severe thunderstorm warnings. Do you guys just try to encompass everything inside the tornado warnings for the most part, or is there, somewhat of a more emphasis on tornadoes versus severe thunderstorms in this case?
That does happen. Sometimes it can get confusing with the polygons, and I know our TV partners can attest to that, especially when they start overlapping each other. But there are times if we think a severe thunderstorm is going to be the main threat, we'll obviously go out with that. But if the circulation begins to evolve, spin down lower into the storm, it's possible you have a tornado warning embedded within that severe thunderstorm warning. So we kind of lay off the severe thunderstorm warning in that case, and then emphasize the tornado warning with our severe weather statements.
And Gary and Wes, you guys were on the air, almost all afternoon, right?
Yeah, I mean, like Steve said, there was a couple of discrete cells that popped out in front of the main line. Because I remember Patty Derrick was our morning meteorologist that day, and she went on live because one of those mornings actually bisected our Raleigh and our coastal viewing area. So we basically went wall to wall in both markets simultaneously. And like Steve mentioned, that one really didn't last long. There was a brief warning. I think it was like 10, 15 minutes. And then the tornado retracted. It lost the rotation in the cell. And then after that, I'll never forget, we started going live during our 12/21 afternoon weather, and we stayed live until 9:32 that evening. So ironically enough, we were live 9 hours and 11 minutes. That 9/11 thing kind of is a little creepy there, but I can never remember ever seeing a line of storms where we basically had tornado warning polygons from Virginia through North Carolina all the way down into South Carolina, with basically every single cell having a tornado warning on it. I mean, it was just, again, it's a once in a 20, 30-year event, I think, for North Carolina, and thankfully it is a once in a 20-year event, because tell you what, I'm glad we don't have to deal with those on a yearly basis like the poor folks out in Oklahoma do.
Yeah, unfortunately here, our bad weather so far this year has been thunderstorms, and we had 2 lightning deaths last week. And then so tomorrow's our anniversary, and it was a Saturday, and I remember it, Gary, because you said you guys went on at 12/21. That's about the time the first warning came out. I was sofa shopping with my wife that day, and when we got up that morning, that's when we went. Did we go to moderate or did we go to high risk Saturday morning? I forget.
We late morning we went to high.
Okay, yeah. So as soon as we went to high, I mean, I knew that I was going to wind up at the station at some point in the day. So, we go out sofa shopping. We're there for like an hour. I have my suit in my car, and I get the first warning. I'm like, okay, I need to get to the station. So my wife dropped me off. So the best thing, and there wasn't a lot of good news out of these storms, it got me out of shopping for furniture with my wife. So after that, it was downhill. At one point throughout the whole afternoon, we had 2 really bad tornadoes on the ground, and by the time it was all done, I think the state had 5 EF3s. 3 of them at one point were in our viewing area. So the worst of it, I think, definitely hit central North Carolina. And what I remember is the next day, it was such a pretty day. It was warm, it was sunny, but yet you had all this destruction all over town. I had went out into the field to cover things, and I think, my weathercast that day, I was on the air that night. The only thing I did in my weathercast was a 7-day, because all of our reporters, all of our meteorologists were out in the field covering recovery stories and damage stories and fatality stories, and didn't seem like anyone really cared about the forecast because of all the bad stuff that had happened the day before. So it was an interesting day because I was out in the field all day, but my weathercast was one graphic, and it was just the 7-day because there was so much else to talk about that day.
Gary and Wes, I hope you guys can hear me. I think I got my internet issues fixed. What was it like being on TV for that long of a period? What's going through your mind? And kind of talk about what you're thinking of as you're alerting your viewing area of these deadly tornadoes coming through.
Well, when we jumped into wall-to-wall, Patty Derrick was on first, and then after a while I noticed that she was kind of running out of gas, so I jump on around 1 o'clock. And it was shortly after that we had multiple warnings, and all of a sudden that cell showed up in Moore County. And I can remember looking up at Patty, holding my mic and saying, I do not like the looks of that cell in Moore County. And come to find out, that was the cell that spun up the EF3 that came across Lee County, did all the damage in Sanford, and then ended up in Wake County. But, you start seeing all these warnings. You start seeing these radar returns, and you're knowing if people are not paying attention, if they're not going to where they need to be going, they're going to get hurt or they're going to get killed. And you go into this mental state where it sounds repetitive, but you're saying where the storm's at, and you're telling people what to do constantly. and the only thing that changes is you're changing the location of where you're pointing the radar. Now, the problem that I found that you tend to get locked into one storm. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I kind of got locked in on that storm that was coming out of Sanford heading toward Wake County because it was heading toward Wake County. But there were other tornado warnings in effect, and you've got to fight that urge to stay with that one bad cell, because that booger had a debris ball on it. And, you know, it looked mean. You could tell that one was a really bad one, but you have to fight the urge, and you got to swing that radar back out, and you've got to get into the other storms that are causing problems around the area. Now, the interesting thing about that EF3, thank God it weakened as it got into Wake County, because I think it dropped to, after it hit Sanford, it dropped to a 2. It may have come through Wake County, I think, as a 2, but that storm actually went just to the east of the TV station. And I'll never forget, and this is how a meteorologist thinks, my Blazer was sitting outside the station on the other side of a plate glass window from the weather center. And as I was doing that live coverage, I'm thinking, wow, this would be some really cool TV if my Blazer went flying in front of the camera. That'd be really cool. That'd be an internet sensation right there. But we stayed with that cell for probably an hour, hour and a half. And I tell you what, at that point, I'd been on air for about 2.5 hours. And I started kind of winding down. Actually, let me back up a second. We had one camera working, live camera in the field working that day. And that was the one that we've got pointing back at the city of Raleigh off South Saunders Street. And I looked up at that camera when we punched to it, and you could see the greenish hue on the sky. And I grabbed my mic, and I looked up at Josh and Patty, and I'm like, are you guys seeing what I'm seeing? Does that look green to you guys? Come to find out, it went out on air because I didn't hold my mic properly. But sure enough, a few seconds later, the camera went down because power went out in that area. And then that thing came roaring across Wake County, and that was the storm that was responsible for the 4 children that died in the trailer on the northeast side of Raleigh. But then I was going to go off air and hand it over to Josh, and that's when the second EF3 popped in Cumberland County and was heading toward Dunn. And I looked up at Josh and I said, man, I know Dunn better than anybody here. I'm from there, so I'm just going to stay with it. And after that one finally got up into Sampson County and dissipated, I handed it off. But you reach a point where you hope you're getting through, but you're also reaching the point where you actually start becoming mentally exhausted because you are so aware of what you're doing and you don't want to screw up. And you know people's lives hang in the balance at that point. And at that point, you really, really, really feel the pressure. And I know Steve feels it at the Weather Service, and I definitely know Wes feels it. But I'll stop talking now, and I'll let Wes jump in and say some stuff about the day as well.
You can tell someone's in TV when they talk forever.
I know, go figure.
You just got to do this to us. Give us the wrap.
Yeah, there you go.
So yeah, we're covering these tornadoes, and a lot of times we're just looking at radar, we're looking at maps, we're looking at graphics, whatever. But when we had our camera pointed, so we're North Raleigh, again, we're right around the corner from Gary. So we're looking south, and yet the moment you actually see that tornado on a video image, that's when things start to change. I mean, that's pretty rare for us. It's rare for anyone that you capture a tornado on video, and yet we were live on TV capturing it. So things changed a little for me there. And then, I forget how long after it was, we started to get pictures in. And when we got that picture in of the Lowe's home improvement store that had pretty much been destroyed, I mean, that's when you really knew, like, okay, we've been talking about how bad this weather is going to be for a couple days. We've been on air today covering it live, telling you how bad it is. But when you actually see the pictures, I mean, even for me, who's covering it, who's the meteorologist and all that stuff, I mean, when you see that destruction, that's when things change. And then I was down there at the Lowe's a couple days later to see it in person, and I was down there a year or two later after it had been rebuilt, and they have a plaque commemorating all that had happened. I mean, things are different. It's one thing to cover it and look at it on a radar, But when you see the destruction, I mean, that's when I knew it was going to be historically bad.
For you guys, had you ever experienced an outbreak like this, or is this kind of the first one, Gary? I believe you've been in North Carolina. Maybe I'm not sure of your past, but I know we don't get that here in North Carolina. But have you guys ever experienced that, throughout your career, or is this the first time?
To this extent, yeah. I mean, I did experience the March '84 outbreak that got eastern North Carolina. That was the worst outbreak that we had seen up to this point, and that was really the first time I had seen tornado damage, significant tornado damage up close. And like Wes said, seeing pictures on TV is one thing, but yeah, when you see it up close and personal, that really, that brings it home real fast. But as far as actually professionally having to deal with it as a meteorologist, I had never dealt with anything. I dealt with the blizzard, of course, like we talked about a few weeks ago, and hurricanes and some minor tornado outbreaks. But again, nothing to the severity of this, where we had for 9 hours, nonstop tornado warnings across the viewing area, and the amount of tornadoes that I mean. Heck, we had more tornadoes in one day than we typically average in North Carolina 1 year. So that speaks volumes as to what we were dealing with that day right there.
I think another important note just to refer to is that we actually had a PDS tornado watch. I mean,
right.
Just from a rare perspective, that's a pretty rare occurrence around here as well, to have, a high risk, but to have a PDS watch in general, or just even have the stronger types of tornadoes. And as you mentioned, the lows, that was a pretty famous one in the Wake County tornado as well. Talk a little bit about those two storms, and whoever wants to take it first, talk about how those storms kind of moved through the area. Let's talk about the Sanford one first, since that came first, and then the Wake County situation.
Yeah, the first one that started down in Moore County, which is where Pinehurst and Southern Pines, that's that county. And then Highway 1 is one of our major thoroughfares that kind of goes through that area, goes up through Sanford, and then feeds into Raleigh and then continues on northeast. More or less, the tornado followed right along that highway. So it came through Sanford in Lee County, which is the county immediately southwest of Wake County. And right about the time it started to really do destruction in Wake County is when we started to get the pictures in. And then we knew, like, okay, hey, we've got proof now for all these storms. But, you don't always get that traditional hook echo on a radar signature. I mean, man, this one had a traditional textbook hook echo. I remember that. I still have the pictures on my computer of that one, because that's the one we show people, like, hey, if you see something like this, it's bad. But when it came to Wake County, it hit, I forget, 1 or 2 trailer home parks and mobile home parks, and they always find those for some reason. But the destruction there was pretty bad too. So those are the 2 highlights I remember. I have a horrible memory, and I don't remember a lot of the meteorology and a lot of what was going on with the velocities and the radar signatures. But I remember the destruction, and I remember the lows, and I remember the mobile home parks here in Raleigh. And as far as the Cumberland County one, I went down a couple weeks after to cover an apartment complex, and then I went a year after that, and they were still rebuilding that apartment complex that had pretty much been destroyed in Cumberland County. So that's down around Fayetteville. That was another one of the EF3s. So you have this apartment complex right here, and across the street was just a wooded area, and half those trees had been just leveled completely from that tornado. So those are the things I remember more than what was going on in the meteorology. Maybe you guys might remember a little more, but that's what sticks out to me 4 years later.
Well, the thing that grabbed me about the storm that actually ended up in Wake County is I remember there was an initial severe thunderstorm warning on the Moore County storm when it was in Moore County, and then just about at the time it was about to cross into Lee County, that's when the tornado warning was issued on it. And I mean, really, that thing spun up fairly fast because it was rated at EF3 when it hit that lows. And I'll be honest, I'm kind of like Wes. When I saw the initial pictures of the lows, I'm like, there's 20 people dead in that store. But, that goes to show you, and I give the guys and the gals down there credit who were the Lowe's employees. They took everybody in the back of that store. I mean, think about these stores. They were full of glass. The whole front's just glass. They took people to the back of that store. The front collapsed, and the back stayed intact. Ironically enough, if any of you remember the November 88 tornado that got Raleigh, it was the weekend after Thanksgiving. Up on Glenwood Avenue, there's a Walmart there. Well, before the tornado, it was a Kmart. And the exact same thing happened. They had some employees in there restocking that night. The tornado hit about 1 o'clock in the morning. The employees hauled into the back of the store. The store collapsed. The very back of the store stayed intact. No one was killed. And again, I think that speaks volumes to what we do these days when it comes to actually educating the public on what to do when it comes to severe weather. On the converse of that, it amazed me the number of people who actually worked here at the TV station who said, were we supposed to get severe weather today? And I'm sitting there thinking, if we've got that many people who actually work in the television station that don't realize we've got severe weather coming, then how are the public handling this information? But I know one thing. I think we dodged a huge bullet that cell weakened, that tornado weakened, because if that thing had stayed at an EF3 strength when it came up across parts of Wake County, then the damage would have been a lot more significant. And the same with the second cell down in Cumberland County. I went down there because, like I said, I'm from Dunn. I went down there and saw the Food Line Distribution Center that got hit. And, to see the damage and I'm sorry if this is gross, but to actually smell the food that was going bad and stuff like that, I mean, it just kind of it's one thing to see it on TV. It's another thing to actually go down and witness it. If a picture's worth 1,000 words, actually witnessing it and seeing the what has happened is worth 1,000,000 words.
And I think Steve's getting ready to share a graphic, but I was wanting to talk to Wes and Gary for just a second. I know social media wasn't as big back then as it is now, but were you guys able? I mean, were you pushing stuff out on social media wise, or you guys more focused on TV wise, trying to get the stuff out over air?
Well, we were actually lucky enough. Like I said, we actually had 3 people on duty that day, and Josh McKinney was pushing stuff out on Facebook and Twitter the entire time. We didn't have the interface like we have on our weather computer now, where we can actually push directly graphics directly out via our weather computer, like radar hits and stuff like that. So it was more of text information that we were sending out at that point. But we were fairly successful. As a matter of fact, ironically enough, our likes on our weather Facebook page actually went up over 1,000 likes that day. And on my personal weather page, the likes went up over 100 that day. So it was a good event for likes on Facebook. But we were, and like I said earlier, I did learn the value of being able to push that information out, because when people lose power, or if they lose cable, they lose their source of information right there, and that tweet or that Facebook post may be the difference in life and death if they're in the path of that storm, and that's the only information they're getting right now.
I apologize if that question was already asked. It was the U-verse problems, I promise. Oh, Ricky, I think you and Steven had some graphics to share.
Yeah, sure. Steven mentioned earlier that he had a few graphics to show, and if you want to toss those up, feel free. Then I've got a question. Was there one thing from the Weather Service perspective, or just from a meteorologist perspective, that you guys kind of saw and it popped out that, this could be something that triggers more tornadoes today than on a normal day?
Well, I think as far east as we are, with that marine influence that we get, usually these storms come barreling through. They run into the marine layer, and the severe weather is hindered this far to the southeast part of the state. So this particular time, the trajectories, if I recall, were more southwest. So there was less of marine influence, which enabled these storms to carry farther into eastern North Carolina. So you again, for April, the water temperatures are still in the 60s, and that can stabilize everything very, very quickly. similar events in March, even those events in November, that the water temperature could be key in the trajectory of the wind. But I just remember that just a deep upper trough, and as soon as we started to see that it was going to turn negatively tilted with the peak heating of the day coming in, so it's like the moons were aligned basically, and that very rarely happens this part of the country. So if you want, I'll share my screen. Let's see here, do entire screen, because I found some things in our archive. Let me just go here and load up. I hope it doesn't show up too fast, this particular loop, because is the radar image showing up?
Yep, we got it.
Okay, and it's going by pretty quick. I apologize for that, but you see, I mean, it's a nice line, but it's broken line. And as you know, those cells just north of the break in all these individual breaks is where you can see some of the tornadic activity. We had a little bit of an onshore flow there. You can see it like Bald Head Island, Southport. But for the most part, this line came through unabated from the marine layer. And just one of the many supercells, this is the one right as it was spinning up near Bladenboro, that resulted in the fatality, and this is the particular one that I think, I don't know if my mouse shows up, but this particular cell I think cranked up and was the one that caused the damage up in Tar Heel and farther north, and this might have been the one that evolved that killed the one individual that struck in the head in Bladenboro and then went towards Elizabethtown. But you know, as Wes mentioned, I mean, a lot of them had a good classic look to them from what you see from radar training. And this is this is what I thought you guys would find very, very interesting. This is the National Severe Storms Lab mesotracks. So basically, where it sees the mesocyclone in the radar data, it will show the intensity based on the color scale. As the mesocyclone intensifies, you'll see the colors get hotter and hotter on here. But to see this many mesocyclones crossing the state, long-lived mesocyclones, was just a very, very incredible. And not every one of these generated a tornado. The ones near Wilmington and might have been up into the Morehead Cities area did, but the ones we had near Wilmington didn't cause any issues. This one didn't here. We did have a tornado near Whiteville, a couple of them with this one, and then of course our big one here. And you can see the real big ones up that Wes and Gary were talking about. So this is just another tool, and what I like to use this tool for is after an event and we don't want to go on a witch hunt looking for tornadoes. We want to go in areas where we feel like the probability of occurrence is the highest. So we'll generate these mesocyclone maps, overlay with Google, and then we'll go do our surveying with the GPS and try and find some of these in the more rural locations. Sometimes it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Sometimes they're quite obvious if they impact people. That one near Ammon up in Bladen County, it generated on the northern side of a hunting preserve, and then there was the hog farm, and then there was the little town of Ammon where a couple people were killed. We didn't know how far into that hunting area that tornado had formed, so we were up there trying to get in. As I was waiting for access, waiting for the person who owned the property to get into that area to begin my hunt for where that particular tornado started. We were sitting there waiting. I was about ready to get out of the vehicle and just start walking, and a large bear and its 3 cubs ran by in front of me. So I was looking for an alternative source because I wasn't going to go where the bears were running around. But luckily, Bladen County Emergency Management had overflights, and we were able to piece together the puzzle based on where we were on the ground and some of these flights. And this was a picture of the hog farm there in Ammon. Poorly constructed buildings, but still just an incredible amount of damage. Many hogs were killed from this event, and a couple weeks later, the April 28th tornadoes in Pender County, I mean, there were a lot of turkeys that were killed. This is the house where the 2 people were killed. You can see where the tornado tracked across, and then you can see what it did to the timber in the area as it moved out of Bladen County. This was near Bladenboro, and just like the buzzsaw going through. Here's another farm that was impacted by that. Church and Elizabethtown area, many places were impacted by them. And I just want to leave you guys with this. And I don't know if you saw this NC State study. I can't remember the author, but they basically put together a map for North Carolina showing that took into account the intensity and the path length and kind of color-coded where you have a higher level of longer-lived and more intense tornadoes. And what's basically showing up in here is that little pocket in west central North Carolina where you can argue there's a higher area of tornado activity. And then we've got a Carolina tornado alley here that goes up along I-95. You can see some of those long-lived tracks from over the years. There's a lot of different heating going on. The Piedmont Trough, the sea breeze can push that far inland on some days, so there's probably a lot more boundary interactions in that part of the state, which is leading to enhanced helicity as these storms ingest some of this more favorable atmosphere and begin to rotate. So I don't know if any questions about some of this.
No, those are some awesome graphics. Somehow I had never seen the rotational tracks for the North Carolina storms before. I think I had seen, of course, the Alabama ones, but I hadn't seen April 15th. It's interesting how there was a slight curvature too, Steve, in some of the storm tracks. Is that just because of the nature of the supercells? It seemed like it curved a little bit, or maybe because of the radar reflection?
I mean, some of it's going to be, some of these big supercells will move right of the mean, so there's that right movement to that. So they're progressing along in the larger scale flow, but they're having an impact on the local environment. They're able to spin off to the right. I mean, sometimes you get the left movers from the splitting storms, but there was some slight right movement to these as they're moving along at a pretty good clip, if I remember.
Yeah, I was actually driving back that day. I was at UNC Charlotte in the morning. We drove down the day before. This is the story I always tell, but I drove down the day before, and we had a SOAR open house event at UNC Charlotte on April 16th. And so they told us that morning there was a tornado watch in effect and everything, and they didn't really tell us what to do if one happened to come ripping across the university. But we left around noon from Charlotte and drove back to Hampton Roads. I drove through Raleigh 10 minutes after the massive tornado, the weaker tornado at the time, but the tornado itself had moved across, I think it was 440 or 40. Maybe Gary or Wes can help me out on that. But
that would be 440.
440, yeah. We drove across 440, and I saw pieces of, housing siding and stuff laying in the road. One of the highway signs was ripped apart, and so I had my radar up on Weather Underground because GR Level 3 decided it wanted to be a virus via McAfee that day, so it actually removed that program from my computer. So I was running on Google Earth GPS and Weather Underground tornado warnings to try to keep us out of the path of a few tornadoes. So, but a funny comment my mom asked, she was like, "Why can't we just sit here and wait it out?" I was like, "Well, we could, but there's one behind us and one in front of us and one to the side of us, so I'm not really sure what our best course of action is here." So, but we made it back to Hampton Roads fine, thankfully.
Yeah, I think that's one of the wildest things, though, when you're stuck in the building doing coverage like that and you're kind of isolated. And that was one of the things that I really noted is when I left is all the bits and pieces of stuff. I mean, I live on the northwest side of Wake County, and there was insulation way up there from the storms, and that kind of brings it home when you've got a storm that is that powerful that was about 15 miles away from that area, and it was throwing debris all the way in that direction. So that's pretty intimidating right there.
Steve, do you remember? Sorry, go ahead, Wes.
I was going to say, Gary, did you hear this story? And everybody, there was a receipt from a Tractor Supply store that was time-stamped right about the time the tornado hit in Lee County. And that receipt, okay, so a little small piece of paper, got carried all the way up into Wake County. They found it with bits of insulation and all that other stuff that got carried up. So that's pretty amazing.
That's pretty crazy. Ricky, I think you had something for Steve.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. You're kind of cutting in and out there. Steve, I was wondering, and maybe this is more of a question for the Raleigh people, but since you're our weather service guru, Didn't the weather service in Raleigh get picked up by somebody? And did you guys have to do anything different at your office in terms of like backup or anything along those lines?
I don't recall if they required backup. Well, we do have plans in place if that does happen. There's a primary and a secondary, so we've got that redundancy in case we lose communications with the world, whether it be a weather event or if we have to evacuate or some other type of thing. But I don't recall. I mean, it's possible they did, but I don't recall the Raleigh office that happening. I know we were operating with no issues. I think the last time we required backup during a significant event was probably Hurricane Bonnie in 1998, where we got cut off.
And how many forecasters did you have on duty that day?
We had about 8. 4 working radar and statements, and then we had a storm coordinator, and then we were trying to get our routine duties out. And social media wasn't even a twinkle in our eye at that time. We didn't get Facebook and Twitter access. We weren't allowed to use it until a week before Hurricane Irene that year moved through. So we're behind the 8 ball when it comes to social media.
I can only imagine being one of the forecasters who isn't on storm tornado warning duty that day and has to put out the regular forecast discussion and what he thinks. But
yeah, they're always looking to. I mean, there's more than just a couple sets of eyes on this stuff, and there's a lot of coordination going on. And likewise, there needs to be a lot of coordination going on when you've got these supercells moving from one county warning area to another. So it's there was a lot of that going on that day, and justifiably so. After you saw the meso tracks, I mean, there's a lot of coordination between Morehead City, Raleigh, and the Wilmington office, even Wakefield eventually.
And that was the great thing, because sometimes you sit there and you wait and go, okay, are we going to see the warning cross into the next CWA? But that day, it's like there was no waiting. It's like there was one warning right behind the other. So for us in the media business, we knew exactly where the storms were going to go, how the warnings were going to shake out with the Weather Service after they developed. And Steve, you know this, I've told you this before, stuff like that helps our job immensely.
Yeah, and then having the ability to share information on the chat between the media partners and the EMs, we can't announce something too far in advance, but we can always say something, hey, we're really keeping an eye on this one. We might have to have a warning on it, and likewise too, we'll hear from our media partners. Hey, what do you guys think about this one? We're getting a little concerned too. So you need to have that dialogue during these extreme weather events. Otherwise, it's easy to get a message lost and confused, and the message doesn't go to where it needs to go to is a failure at that point.
Wes, did you have a comment?
Yeah, well, here's the story of what happened at our National Weather Service office. So the National Weather Service in Raleigh is located on NC State's campus. And so the tornado came within about 2 miles of their office, and their operations room is it's on the 3rd floor, and it's like all glass windows. So they actually did evacuate into the stairwell for about 5 to 10 minutes, and they switched operations up to Blacksburg, Virginia. But it was 5 or 10 minutes, and nobody knew until afterwards. And then they came back. They lost power, I think, but there was no damage. But yeah, they did have to actually do their own little evacuation at the Weather Service office in Raleigh, and that's that's something we started to think about here. Like when we saw the live video of the tornado off in the distance, I mean, okay, what are we going to do if that tornado comes close to our station? I mean, so I'm sure the National Weather Service, they have a plan, but do people really ever think that it's going to come to them? And I don't think people really do.
Well, my plan was to dive underneath the weather desk. I actually said that on air, and people remember that more than any other thing that I did that day, is that I was going to dive underneath the weather desk if the windows blew in, which would have made for some cool TV too.
Well, Wes and Gary, I know you guys, we're closing on 9 o'clock, and one question I want to ask, and I'm sorry I missed the first part, and if you covered this, that's all right, but when you were out after the storm and doing those interviews and recovery efforts, did you have any stories that stuck to mind of maybe people told you or you heard from your reporters who were out in the field, something that kind of just like, man, that's different, tornadoes do crazy stuff, but was there one story? I know the receipt, that's an amazing story, but was there any other stories that kind of just caught your attention?
For me...
Oh, go ahead, Wes. Go ahead. No, go.
I live in Holly Springs, and the tornado that hit Wake County came right through Holly Springs. So that I remember a lot about it because, I'm getting messages from my wife, as I'm talking about a tornado in Holly Springs, and, I can't talk to her and everyone on TV at the same time. So I remember a lot about it. But I remember one of our friends worked at a pizza store, a pizza restaurant, and they saw the tornado across Highway 55 in Holly Springs, which is in southwestern Wake County. And it's starting to get really windy, and they're thinking about barricading the doors, locking them up because they see the tornado, things are starting to get a little hairy. And as they're doing that, in comes this mom with her 2 kids. She's trying to get them out of the car. They were coming into the restaurant. They're barricading the doors. So he's got to help this lady in with her kids, one of which was a baby. And they all go into the back of the restaurant, into the refrigerator freezer, and kind of close themselves in until things calm down. But I remember just a lot about it because it was close to my house. And, talk about when things change, when you see the picture of the tornado, when you see the destruction it's done, man, when that thing started coming close to my house and my neighborhood, I mean, it's hard to stay focused when things like that happen. But, I remember every little thing. We had a guy, a 100-foot tall pine tree collapsed on his house, smashed his truck, came right through his house, and they were one room over. So I remember a lot of little things about it that normally maybe I wouldn't have because it didn't hit my town, but this time it did.
Yeah, I consider myself lucky, Wes, because I live up toward RDU, and the storms actually stayed well away from RDU as far as the tornadic storms, which was fantastic, because that weighs a lot on you when you're looking at the radar and the storm's heading to where you live. But the story that really stands out to me was the 4 kids who died in Wake County. They lived in a mobile home. The mom knew the tornado was coming, and she did the best thing that she could at the time, is she put the kids in the bathroom of the mobile home, and just so happened a huge pine tree came down, and it went right through that room and killed 3 of them instantly, and then the 4th child died a day or so later. But when you hear sad stories like that, it underscores the importance of meteorology and getting the proper information out to people to save their lives. It's added pressure, but for the most part, that's the reason why we became meteorologists, is to study the weather and, bottom line, help people. But I was thinking a few days ago, preparing for this, but in the March 84 outbreak, we had fewer tornadoes and more fatalities. And those tornadoes went through more rural areas, with the exception of the one that went through downtown Red Springs. In the 2011 outbreak, we had more tornadoes, but we had fewer fatalities, and those storms actually went through higher populated areas. So it seems to be working. Either we got lucky on April 16, 2011, or getting the information out, telling people what to do, where to go when these things happen. People are learning, and it sounds like we're doing our jobs, and people are listening.
And the last question, I know Wes has got to get going. What was the spotter interaction like? Did you guys get a lot of reports from people out in the field? How did that help you, if it did at all?
I think, like Steve mentioned, we had chat going, and to be honest, I can't remember. I cannot remember. I know we started getting videos in before I think we saw. Most of the storm reports that we were seeing were coming straight from the Weather Service. But they were spotter reports. But to be honest with you, Wes, you may know a little bit more. Steve, you may have a little bit better handle on that. But it's all kind of that part is kind of a blur for me.
I guess not.
What was the question? Was about spotters?
Yeah, did you have a lot of spotter interaction during the event? I mean, did you have any on air live, or did you hear any stories from those guys?
We may have had like 1 or 2 people call in. We did start to get a lot of pictures after things had started to calm down. but it's always so hard during the event to get verified information, and that's a challenge. That's a challenge we had last week. Lightning strikes, house fires. Is it a little fire with just some smoke, or is the whole house, burning to the ground? I mean, the hail we had last week, pea-sized, nickel-sized. We heard reports of baseball-sized hail, but until you get those pictures, it's just so hard. But it's so hard during, always after the event when things have started to calm down that you get all the information.
Right. Stephen, do you have any stories that kind of stuck out to you?
Yeah, and especially the day or two after, because the storm surveys took a couple of days to do, and as a warning coordination meteorologist, it's one of my primary duties, and it's very difficult going to locations where people have been killed and try and do your job, especially when children are involved. And I know, Gary had mentioned that one story before too. Also, just the impacts that you see environmentally with the hog farm. A lot of animals that were killed, and so stuff like that sticks with you. Rocky Point tornado several years ago, where children were killed. It's nothing in particular, but it's just having to deal with seeing people whose lives have been turned upside down. And some of the things that I find pretty disturbing too is, I can understand people wanting to drive by and see what had happened, because I think that creates a realness that people do get impacted by severe weather, and maybe they'll be more inclined to take action based on them seeing it firsthand. But when they get out of their car and start trying to interact with people who are trying to pick their lives up and put them back together, I've witnessed that. Or I just sometimes there's times where people need to be left alone to be able to gather their lives, and I see a lot of intrusiveness that bothers me.
Yeah, we saw that up here a couple of years ago when we had a EF2 tornado come through the area. We're after 9 o'clock, and I know Gary and Wes have to get some TV stuff done, so we'll kind of wrap up this part of the show. If you guys, anybody else, have any ending questions you want to ask before we sign off?
I have a question. Mr. Stephen, as a warning coordination meteorologist, what are your duties? You brought that up, and I was just wondering.
Yeah, and it's a good question, because I don't forecast as much as I used to, but the great part about my job is I get to work a lot with our partners. Gary, Wes, the local meteorologist in Wilmington, Myrtle Beach, work with schools, develop exercises and drills for partnerships and events with our emergency management. So, just as an example, yesterday I was at NC State. I was at the McKimmon Center at a North Carolina Coastal Conference giving a presentation about rip currents. I'm never brought out to talk about rainbows. It's always something bad, but I feel like the partnerships that we have, we can make a difference, and I feel like I'm part of that team, so it's a very rewarding job that I have.
Awesome deal. All right, guys, we're going to wrap up this part of the segment. Wes, if you're still around, I was going to have you plug social media-wise how people can get a hold of you, and personally thank you for coming on tonight.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. You can see at the bottom on Twitter and Instagram, WeatherWes, or WNCN WeatherWes on Facebook. The reason I have to run, and not to brag, but so one of the most incredible pieces of tornado video from last week from the storms in the Midwest came from this guy, Sam, and he used to live in Raleigh, and I'm about ready to talk to him for our news tonight. So that's the one where the guy's like really calm, and this tornado's like 20 feet in front of him, and he's just like as calm as can be. So I'm getting off. I'm going to talk to him in about 10 minutes. So that's why I'm
the one under the bridge.
Yeah, Wes, can you ask a question from us?
Yes.
Ask him, was he just driving down the road that day, or was he out actually, wanting to see? Because I think like in the video we heard him, he said something about my curiosity has got the best of me, or something like that in the video. And so that was the big question. Everybody saying, was he out, quote unquote, chasing the storm, or was it just he just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time?
Well, I'll ask him that. I'm also going to ask him what his day job is, because he's got to be like a lion tamer or a high-rise construction guy, because he doesn't fear anything. If he can be that close to a tornado, be talking that calmly. But anyway.
And then ask him why he didn't just keep driving on by it before it came to the road, because I was kind of curious about that one myself.
Right. Yeah, we got a lot of questions. So yeah, we'll do that. But thank you all for having me. let's hope we never have to have a seminar like this again, because those were rough days 4 years ago.
Most definitely. And Wes, if you can, post that on your Facebook page, and we can share it on your interview, and we can share it on the Carolinas Weather Group page as well.
I'll do it.
Awesome. And Wes, thank you so much. We'll let you get going, and hopefully we can have you back on sometime.
Yeah, anytime. Let me know. Steve, Gary, good stuff. Good to be with you guys, and thanks everyone from Carolina Weather Group.
Thank you, Wes. We appreciate it. Have a great night.
All right.
You're
All right, Mr. Gary, I'll let you plug some social media if you want to.
All right, Facebook page is Chief Meteorologist Gary Stephenson. Twitter handle, I actually have to look it up because I can't remember it half the bloody time. It is at @GStephenson_WX for weather. That shows you how technically advanced I am when it comes to social media. But anyway, try to put out a bunch of weather stuff and bird stuff and picture stuff and airplane stuff on all of those. So again, thanks guys for allowing me to be on again tonight. It was good stuff.
Gary is becoming one of our favorite guests to have on, so you may be seeing Gary more often when his schedule allows him to come on. We always appreciate your information and your input.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
We appreciate it. And yeah, go follow him on Facebook. He put some pretty awesome pictures up of planes and birds and stuff, so great stuff. And Stephen, I'll let you plug some social media, maybe for the weather office or your personal stuff if you want to.
Yeah, we if you in Facebook, U.S. National Weather Service, Wilmington, North Carolina. Now, there's also a Wilmington, Ohio office. They're good folks too. So if you want to friend them, that'd be great. But make sure you friend the right office for us. And likewise, when you do your search on Twitter, to be the same sort of scenario you're going to run into. So we there's a lot of great information if you haven't found us on there already, and we share a lot of our partner links as well too. So one way or another, you'll see some good info.
So if your travels take you to Carolina Beach or Curry Beach or Myrtle Beach or North Myrtle Beach, that's the guy who's giving you your forecast in those areas when you vacation in the summertime. All right, guys, we will kind of close up shop. I will talk a little bit about next week's show, and then I'm not sure if Joey has a rant. I should have asked him earlier today, but if Joey has a rant, I will let him kind of fill out or close the show with that. So
I was say I don't have a rant, but before we jump any further, I want to make sure that one of our followers, Winmo, mentioned she's a little under the weather this week. Just want to make sure because she watches every week, so we can't deny not wishing her a speedy recovery.
Yes, Miss Lynn, get better. I know she's got a ulcer on her eye, which sounds really painful. So we appreciate you watching, and we hope you get better soon. And next week we're going to continue the tornado talk, and we're going to talk about the super outbreak of 2011, April 27th through the 28th, as it went through Alabama and then up into the northern Georgia and upstate South Carolina, kind of ended here in North Carolina. So next week we have Wes Wyatt, Fox 6 News out of Birmingham, Alabama, as well as Mark Prater on from Birmingham, and we're going to try to get someone local on as well in the North Carolina or South Carolina area to kind of talk about the impacts that we received from that. And then to kind of round out Severe Weather Month, at the end of April, we're going to have Mr. Gary England on. He is the chief meteorologist for goodness knows how many years out in Oklahoma City, and Gary's going to come in, and that's probably going to be a 2-hour show, so if you're going to be watching, prepare for a long show because Gary loves to talk, and quite honestly, I love to hear him talk. He is a fantastic man, and I'm very blessed to be able to meet him a couple of weeks ago, and I think everyone will enjoy his conversation. So, Joey, I want to toss it to you as we kind of wrap up the show. Maybe.
This has been a show of just technical difficulties everywhere, Scott. So, maybe it's best if we just knock this thing off and call it a day.
It's been well, the bad thing is Joey's got to end the show. He's got the controls, so well, I don't know what to do.
I'll crop it once we get to that point.
Control Alt Delete.
That's it.
We could kick it.
There he is.
But anyway.
Joey, there, maybe. Well, anyways.
Well, we lost him more.
Thanks for watching us. This has been a show of disasters. But Stephen and Gary, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll do this again. So hopefully, if they don't kick us off the internet. I don't know what to do, Ricky. Joey controls the end of the show, so.
This is like a video I shared with my anchor yesterday. It's when the prompter fails. It's a music video, and it's like this news anchor freaking out because he doesn't know what to do because he doesn't have prompter anymore.
Ricky, have you learned that about television, that meteorologists know how to ad-lib and anchors can only read off of a teleprompter? And
Oh, yeah.
one thinks they both have the toughest jobs?
Yep.
Because
And then,
most anchors
meteorologists
can ad-lib their way out of a paper bag.
the meteorologists aren't very good at reading off the teleprompter either. Because
terrible. Yes, terrible.
There you go, Joey's coming back.
All
Because
right, he's coming back.
Chris apparently tried to do it once. Olivia was telling me a story. Chris tried it once, and he just couldn't do it. It was a tornado story for a package, and he messed it all up.
Well,
I write my teases on prompter, but I don't say them most of the time as is. So
I can ad-lib for 3 hours, but God knows if you want me to read 3 seconds worth of script, I'll screw it up.
And Joey's
Joey,
back.
can you end the show now, please?
Yeah, sorry about that. I completely lost it. I'm just glad I didn't cut the show off completely. But yeah, the modem just reset itself right in the middle of that. So I figured I was going to come back and it would have already completely cut the show off. So
No, we're still live.
oh, well, awesome. Well, I'm glad this will be an interesting podcast.
This should be Carolina's Weather Group 40. What is it? 404.
Error not found.
Yeah. This was filled. Okay, well let's end this thing. Scotty, did you say the tagline already? Tell everybody.
We'll see you next Wednesday.
Y'all, we're out. Bye, folks.